I need you to listen to this closely, because I'm not even sure I'm telling the story right. It started with a thing that shouldn't even exist, a sound that science just can't explain. Think about the one piece of evidence in your life that, if you showed it to anyone, they'd call you totally nuts. This is that thing for me. I'm talking about a voice on a phone recording that literally belongs to no one. If you're watching this right now, chances are you crave that deep down, gut punch terror that sticks with you long after the screen goes dark. Here on MindLoop, we don't do cheap thrills. We hunt for the psychological truth behind the fear. The kind of dread that makes you question if your own mind is safe. If you get that, if you feel that, then you already know what you need to do to stay locked in with us. I was 21, a junior at ASU, living off campus in this beat-up house with 3 other dudes. It was a classic student rental, cracked walls, a basement that smelled like old socks and regret, and a fridge that was never full. My room was downstairs, right next to the basement door. I always hated that door, a thin, cheap slab of wood that rattled when the wind blew right. It was a Tuesday night, about 2 in the morning. I was in a deep rabbit hole on my laptop, headphones on, trying to finish a paper that was due at 8. The house was dead quiet. My roommates, Liam, Mike, and Chris, were all heavy sleepers. So when my phone lit up with a notification, I almost didn't even look at it. It wasn't a text or a call. It was a file transfer alert from an app. I barely used a secure cloud folder I'd shared with Liam for school stuff. The file name was just audio01.mp4. Weird. But Liam was notorious for late-night work sessions. I figured he'd dropped a voice note for a group project. I opened it without thinking, kept my headphones on, and hit play. The first 10 seconds were nothing but the muffled sounds of our house at night. The distant hum of the fridge, the floorboards settling upstairs. Typical white noise. I was about to close it when the static cut out and a whisper came through. It was so clear, so close, I actually snatched my headphones off. I swore someone was standing right behind my chair, breathing down my neck. But the room was empty. I put the headphones back on, my heart suddenly doing the Macarena in my chest. The voice was low, gravelly, and it was speaking so fast I couldn't make out the words. It sounded panicked, like someone trying to spit out a warning before a door slammed shut. What got me, though, what turned the cold fear into a sickening dread, was the content. It wasn't random noise. It was a conversation. 2 voices. One was the rapid whisper. The other was deeper, calmer, and oddly, patient. It was like hearing a teacher talk to a screaming child. But the teacher was made of shadow. The rapid whisper, the first voice, suddenly cut through the noise, clear as a bell, and what it said instantly made my blood go ice cold. The lock is fake. He can see us right now. I froze. My gaze shot immediately to the basement door. That crappy, rattling door was right next to me, maybe 4 feet away. And then the second voice, the deep, patient one, replied. It was so close, so perfectly captured, it felt like my mic was inside its mouth. Oh, I know. Right after that deep, quiet line, the whole audio clip ended. Just silence. I ripped the headphones off again, my hands shaking. The file was exactly 3 minutes and 12 seconds long. I checked the timestamp. Liam had uploaded it at 2:02 a.m. That was 10 minutes ago. I texted him immediately. Yo, what's with the voice note? Did you record the creepy janitor? A minute later, Liam replied, What are you talking about, man? I've been asleep since midnight. My stomach dropped right out of my body. If Liam hadn't recorded it, who the hell did? And how did they use my secure cloud link? And what the heck did that last line even mean? He can see us right now. Was it me they were talking about? Was someone in the house? I slowly got off my bed, my eyes glued to the dark, rattling basement door. I knew I should check the lock, but the truth is, I was scared stiff. I was terrified of what might be waiting. For me on the other side of that flimsy wooden door. I was terrified of what might be waiting. For me on the other side of that flimsy wooden door. The air in my small basement room suddenly felt heavy, like I was trying to breathe under a thick blanket. My adrenaline was spiking so hard it made my ears ring. He can see us right now. That line just kept looping in my head. I forced myself to move, my legs feeling like they were made of concrete. I reached out and grabbed the brass knob of the basement door. It was cold. I turned it slowly, deliberately. The lock was thrown. It was bolted shut, solid. For a second, I felt that sharp, sweet rush of relief. Okay, nothing's getting in. It's just a recording, a super messed up recording, maybe a weird hack, Maybe a twisted joke from a different friend, but nothing physically here. But then my brain, that absolute jerk, started doing math. If the door was locked, how did the person who made that audio file get out? The file was uploaded just 10 minutes ago. It was recorded in the house, I was sure of it. That muffled humming in the background? That's the old messed up water heater in the basement. It makes that exact noise every night. I hit reply to Liam's text, my thumbs flying over the screen. Dude, this is dead serious. I need you to check your sent folder. I got an audio file. It's bad. Like, really bad. He didn't reply right away. Probably sleeping the sleep of the innocent, the lucky ones. I couldn't stand being alone down there anymore. My room felt like a cage. I grabbed my phone, left the basement door alone, and headed upstairs. The ground floor was just as quiet, but the quiet felt different now. It felt like it was holding its breath. The living room was dark. The kitchen was dark. Everything was exactly where it should be, except for one thing that made my stomach churn with a fresh wave of panic. The coffee maker. We have this super old dumb Mr. Coffee machine. You have to physically flip the switch on the side for it to run, and it was always off at night. But right now, on the counter, the small green light on the side of the machine was lit up on. I hadn't touched it. No one else was up. It's not automatic. I walked over and touched the glass carafe. It was still cool. Someone must have just flipped the switch. Probably less than a minute ago, before the burner even had a chance to heat up. Minor anomaly. But at that moment, it felt like a warning shot. I crept down the hall to Liam's room. I knocked quietly. No answer. I pushed the door open a crack. He was dead to the world, snoring softly, his phone charging on his nightstand. He didn't look like a guy who had just uploaded a terrifying ghost conversation to a shared folder. I checked Chris's room, then Mike's. Both guys were sacked out, totally oblivious. Okay, so no one in the house recorded it, but the recording was definitely from inside the house, right now. This is where the reality bending started. I went back to my room, sat on the edge of my bed, and decided I was going to delete the file. Get rid of the evidence, pretend I imagined the whole thing. But before I could, something compelled me to listen one more time. I pulled the file up, hit play, and put the headphones back on. The first 2 minutes, the muffled house sounds, the frantic whisper. It was all the same. The whisper cut in, "The lock is fake. He can see us right now." Deep voice. "Oh, I know." But this time it didn't end there. I must have been so freaked out the first time that I missed the absolute worst part. I swear I'm not lying, the audio kept going for another 3 seconds. In that dead silence after the deep voice said, "Oh, I know," there was a single, soft, wet sound. It was a smack, like someone had pressed their wet palm against the microphone. And right after the smack, a faint, almost inaudible chuckle. Not the deep voice, but the first whisperer. The panicked one. It was a relieved, almost giddy sound, followed by something that sounded like a door clicking shut. The realization hit me so hard it was physically nauseating. The two voices weren't talking to each other. They were talking to me. The whisperer said, "The lock is fake. He can see us right now." He was talking to the deep voice, thinking I was the threat they needed to hide from. But the deep voice, the one that replied, "Oh, I know," that was a response to my own internal terror. It was acknowledging that I knew something was wrong, and that final sickening chuckle. The whisperer wasn't relieved they escaped. They were relieved they found a way to get my attention. And the door clicking shut, that wasn't the basement door closing from the outside. It was the sound of a very small space, like a closet, being closed from the inside. My hands were shaking uncontrollably now. I needed to delete the file. Right now. I hit the menu icon and selected Delete Everywhere. A little success window popped up. File removed from all shared folders. I tossed my phone onto the bed. Done. It was gone. It was just a messed up recording. It was probably a hack, a prank, or maybe I was just tripping out from lack of sleep. I took a huge, shuddering breath. I was about to stand up when I heard a very gentle, almost scratching sound, and my laptop, which I had closed earlier, suddenly woke up. The screen was dark, but the keyboard backlight came on. It did that little startup hum. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't moved it. And then, a new notification popped up on the blank screen. It wasn't an email. It was a single, tiny, plain text memo open on the desktop. The title was, "Found You," and the text box was empty except for a flashing cursor. And as I stared at the flashing line, an entirely new file, a second audio clip, instantly appeared on my desktop. The name wasn't a generic number this time. It was specific. It was horrifying. It was labeled MindLoop Max Retention.mp4. I knew I was about to play something I would regret for the rest of my life. My finger hovered over the trackpad, but I couldn't pull it back. I had to know. The dopamine loop, that sick curiosity, had already taken over. My finger was hovering over that file name. MindLoop Max Retention.mp4. That name, man. It didn't feel like a hack or a random virus. It felt targeted. It felt like this thing, whatever it was, knew exactly what I was trying to do. It was playing a game, and the rules were written in the script of my own fear. I was tripping hard, but the sick, electric curiosity was too powerful. It was the absolute worst kind of addiction, and I caved. I clicked. I slapped the headphones on, but I didn't get the sound of a voice. Not at first. Instead, I got the sound of sheer, unadulterated panic. It was heavy, ragged breathing interspersed with wet, choking gasps. It was the sound of someone running full out, desperately trying to catch their breath and failing. And it was so loud, so close, it felt like the microphone was pressed against someone's diaphragm. It sounded like me. A sharp, metallic clicking sound began, a rhythm like a broken metronome, and then a whisper cut through the noise. But this time it wasn't gravelly or fast. It was smooth, calm, and utterly chilling. The deep voice from the first recording. You can't stop watching. That's the loop. The need to know. It's the perfect story. Then my own voice, the panicked one, screamed, but it was muted, muffled, like I was screaming into a pillow. I deleted it. I told them to turn it off. It won't let me go. The deep voice chuckled again, that slow, patient sound that made my skin crawl. Oh, they love you, kid. They're absolutely hooked. They're all ears now. You got that 100% retention you wanted, and now you belong to the story. That was the revelation. This thing wasn't just haunting our house. It was feeding on the story itself, on the raw fear and curiosity it generated. It was using my ambition, my goal of creating addictive, high-retention content for MindLoop as a way to exist. I was the one who had invited it in, not with an Ouija board or a cursed item, but with a digital file and a desire for views. The file wasn't a warning about the monster. It was the monster's manifesto. My gut twisted so violently I almost threw up. I snatched the headphones off, the sound of my panicked future self still echoing in my ears. And in the sudden, dead silence of my room, I heard it. The thin wooden basement door was rattling again. But this time it wasn't just the wind. It was slow, deliberate. It sounded like something was scratching wood from the other side, right by the lock plate. I scrambled off the bed and backed up against the opposite wall. The scratching stopped, and a new sound began. A quiet, high-pitched grinding. It was coming from the edge of the door frame, right where the deadbolt slides into the metal strike plate. I could see it now, even in the dim light. A tiny, black, oily stain was spreading on the white paint of the door frame, starting right next to the brass lock. As I watched, the stain stretched, elongating. And then I realized it wasn't a stain. It was something pushing through the wood itself. The wood of the door frame was splintering, and something thin and bone-white was forcing its way out. It was a finger. Too long, too thin, with a fingernail that looked like yellowed ceramic. It came through the crack, right where the lock assembly was. The creature wasn't trying to pick the lock. It was bypassing the structure entirely. It knew the lock was fake because it understood that the barrier was supposed to be the wall, not the bolt. And it was coming through the wall. The finger curled, reaching for the deadbolt itself. It was inside my room's structural integrity, operating in the sliver of space between the door and the wall. I let out a ragged sound that was half scream, half sob. The thing was going to unbolt the door from the outside in. As the finger closed around the brass bolt, my brain screamed one thing: run. I didn't grab my laptop. I didn't grab my phone. I didn't look for my roommates. I turned and sprinted for the stairs. I had to get out of the house. I had to get away from the basement. I had to get away from the story. I reached the bottom step of the staircase that led up to the living room. And that's when I heard the heavy, solid sound that made my feet slide out from under me. It wasn't the sound of the door opening. It was the sound of the entire, thin wooden door being pulled off its hinges with a wrenching, splintering crack, followed by the soft thud of it hitting the concrete floor of the basement. And then I heard the heavy, deliberate footsteps starting to ascend the basement stairs, moving towards the room I had just abandoned. and they were going to come for the house, and they were going to come for me. I heard the heavy, deliberate footsteps starting to ascend the basement stairs, moving towards the room I had just abandoned, and they were going to come for the house, and they were going to come for me. I didn't stop running. I scrambled up the main staircase 2 steps at a time, my heart slamming against my ribs like a fist against a door. I was shouting, but it came out as a strangled croak. I flew through the living room, tripping over the faded area rug. I had to get to Liam's room, wake him up, tell him what was happening. We had to call the cops. We had to get the hell out of that rental. I reached Liam's door, pounded on it with the heel of my hand. "Liam, wake up! Get up, man! It's in the house." No response. Just the soft, rhythmic sound of his snoring coming through the thin wood. He was out cold. I turned back toward the hallway, ready to yell for Mike and Chris. And that's when the twist hit me. It wasn't a sudden shock, but a slow, sickening slide into doubt. The house was absolutely silent. The footsteps? Gone. The wrenching sound of wood? Gone. The only noise was my own ragged breathing, which sounded deafening in the stillness. I stood there, panting, paralyzed, staring down the dark hallway leading to my room and the open maw of the basement. Nothing. No shadow. No sound. No bone-white finger. Did I imagine it? Did the stress, the sleepless nights, and the sheer terror from the audio file finally break my brain? I needed proof. I needed to see the damage. So I did the stupidest thing a person can do in a horror story. I went back. I crept down the stairs using the wall for support. I stopped at my room's doorway and flipped the light switch. Everything was exactly as it should be. My bed was neat. My laptop was closed and dark on the desk, and the crappy, thin wooden basement door was still there. It was closed. It was standing upright in the frame, and the brass deadbolt was still thrown. It was locked, solid, unbreached. My knees buckled and I sank onto the floor, hyperventilating. It was all a hallucination. The files, the voices, the finger, the door being ripped off, it had to be. My mind had totally snapped. But then I saw the detail, the one tiny, microscopic error that made the emotion flood back, crushing the relief. The brass deadbolt, the part that slides into the strike plate, was locked. But right next to the lock, the paint on the white door frame was slightly scratched. It wasn't a deep gouge, just a faint, oily smudge that went vertically along the edge of the wood, exactly where something long and thin would have had to rub against it to get inside and manipulate the lock. And on the floor, right at the base of the door, there was a single tiny wood shaving. It was thin, about 1 inch long, and unnaturally white, almost like a piece of bleached bone. It was impossible to see unless you were right there on your hands and knees. It wasn't a hallucination. It was something that could undo the physical world without leaving a trace. Except for one tiny, perfect piece of evidence. It had come through, used my fear to generate the noise of a breakdown, and then retreated, leaving me with the chilling knowledge that it was capable of erasing its own tracks. The deep voice had said, "They're absolutely hooked. They're all ears now. You got that 100% retention you wanted, and now you belong to the story." This wasn't a house haunting. It was a story haunting. The entity lived in the narrative, the tension, the curiosity. It didn't want to kill me. It wanted to keep me alive and terrified. Because the longer I lived, the more material I created for it. My fear was its food. My need to understand was its lifeblood. And my ambition to create an addictive YouTube story for MindLoop had been the perfect invitation. I finally grabbed my phone from the bed, my hands sticky with cold sweat, and opened the cloud folder again. The file audio001.mp4 was still deleted. Thank God. But my desktop was still open. And there, on the screen, was the plain text memo. It no longer read, "Found you." The text had changed, and the flashing cursor was still blinking. It now read a single, horrifying sentence that made the reality of my predicament absolutely undeniable. It was the most intimate violation I could imagine. It was a line only I should have known. "The coffee maker is still on, dude. You're gonna burn the place down if you don't watch it." It wasn't just a voice on a recording. It was here. I watched it. And it was using my own personal real-life anxieties to troll me. It was a psychological terrorist attack. I had to know where the entity was, where it was hiding, and how to stop it from writing the final chapter of my life. I was trapped not by walls, but by the overwhelming, addictive nature of the mystery I had created. The text had changed, and the flashing cursor was still blinking. It now read a single, Horrifying sentence that made the reality of my predicament absolutely undeniable. It was the most intimate violation I could imagine. It was a line only I should have known. "The coffee maker is still on, dude. You're gonna burn the place down if you don't watch it." I backed away from the laptop, my eyes wide and stinging. The coffee maker. I had seen the green light, but in my panic, I had totally forgotten to turn it off. This thing, this MindLoop entity, wasn't just watching my digital life. It was monitoring my real-world mistakes, acting like a terrifying, passive-aggressive roommate who knows all your deepest fears. I ran to the kitchen and practically tackled the coffee machine, slapping the switch off. The little green light vanished. The moment I plunged the kitchen back into silence, my phone buzzed with an incoming text. Not from Liam, Mike, or Chris. It was from an unknown number. The text was short, 3 words, and it chilled me to the bone. "Much better." I dropped my phone like it was on fire. I didn't save the number. I didn't reply. I just grabbed my keys, threw on a jacket, and ran out of the house. I drove to the nearest 24-hour diner, the kind with sticky booths and terrible coffee, and sat in the corner for 3 hours, just watching the highway traffic. When the sun finally came up, I drove back to the house. The world looked normal again. Too normal. The guys were awake, groggily making breakfast. I walked into the kitchen and Liam looked at me, frowning. "Dude, where were you?" he asked, stirring his oatmeal. "And why is your laptop sitting wide open on your desk? You usually lock that thing up like Fort Knox." I swallowed hard. I looked at the coffee maker, off. I looked at Liam. "Did you go down to my room last night? Or this morning?" He laughed. "Nah, man. The basement? That thing's creepy. Plus, I don't even know what you're working on." I walked past him and into my room. The laptop was open. I closed the lid, ignoring the jolt of dread. I looked at the basement door, closed, locked, undamaged, no wood shaving. No smudge, the whole thing was perfectly fine. I stared at the pristine white paint for a long time. I was starting to believe Liam. Maybe I had cracked. Maybe the stress had finally conjured a full-blown psychological break. But then I checked the file properties on my laptop's system log. The second file, MindLoop Max Retention DEMP4, the one with the deep voice and my own panicked scream, was gone, completely scrubbed from the system. But the log showed that a file with that name had been created exactly at 2:20 a.m., and right underneath it, the log showed a different event. A single line of text that shouldn't exist in a system log. File My Story Arc Part 1 archived. Status, pending audience approval. That's when I realized the horrifying truth. The monster hadn't retreated. It had simply completed its first act. It had created the perfect horror story by using my own life. And now it was waiting for the next round of fuel. It was waiting for the audience, for you, to validate its existence. It didn't want to kill me yet. It needed me to keep telling the story. Because if I stop talking about it, if I stop feeling the fear, the story ends. And if the story ends, the entity dies. So, here's where we are right now. I've told you part 1. I've given you the evidence. I've shown you the impossible recording, the unripped door, and the chilling message that proved it was watching me in real time. But the entity is still out there, archived in the network, waiting to see if its story gets the engagement it craves. I need to know if I'm the only one going through this. Have you ever felt like your own life was being written for someone else's entertainment? Like your fear was being farmed for clicks? If you want to know what happens when a story entity moves on to part 2, if you want to know what it demands next to keep me alive and spinning this twisted yarn, you need to let us know. Smash that like button if this story hooked you. And if you feel that same cold dread, that sick, addictive curiosity, and you have to know the rest of the truth, then make sure you hit that subscribe button on MindLoop. Because the more you crave the next chapter, the more fuel you give the monster. And the more fuel it gets, the closer I get to the horrifying final twist it's already written for me. Tell me you want part 2. I need the story to continue, or I might be stuck in this loop forever.